welcome to the Butler Beat. I'm Mary Algier. While the spring semester is getting into full swing, Butler students are already starting to think about where they will live next year. Here to talk about housing is Associate Director of Residence Life, Doug Howe. Thanks for coming in today, Doug.
Great, my pleasure.
So, when will students have to start planning where they're going to live next year?
Well, I think for some students the planning has already begun. We will be doing the online housing intentions process from Valentine's Day until the students leave for spring break. So for the rising juniors and the rising sophomores, that's their time frame to go online and complete their intentions. And that could be, are you living on campus? Are you living in your Greek house? Are you living with mom and dad at home? The seniors obviously can live off campus, but the ones who want to live in the village have already started to respond to me as well, saying that they want to live in the village again next year. So it's a very exciting time for us in residence life.
All right, do seniors get preference over juniors in AV?
Well, seniors are actually allowed to reclaim their village apartment, and so they do get to go first in that sense, that they tell me, do you want to live in the same apartment or do you want to live in a different apartment? So that process is done in advance. But then in terms of the housing selection, the juniors will go first and then the sophomores will go after that.
Well, I know that one of the biggest concerns for current sophomores, if they're planning on living in AV next year, is a big concern about getting in, especially with the growing numbers. How do students get a room, an apartment in AV?
Mm-hmm. We do, as I mentioned, the online housing intent process is first from Valentine's Day until they leave for spring break. And then we close that down and actually create random lottery numbers. And everyone is assigned a lottery number. And then after spring break, for example, for the rising juniors, on Monday, March 25th is when they will actually go into the Riley room and we put them in lottery number order, so to speak. They come at a certain time depending on when their lottery number is. And then we just go through and we call the numbers, and then they're in their roommate groups, and their group can come up and see what's available and pick from the spaces that are available when it's their turn to go.
Do you have to have 3 other roommates to go into the lottery, or just yourself or one person?
Yeah, for rising juniors, we do recommend groups of 4. All of the village apartments are 4 individual bedrooms, and so groups of 4 really work out well there. In addition, some juniors will be able to, there will be some junior spaces in UT and CTS, and so groups of 4 work out really well there too.
Okay, so how is the process for getting into UT different from getting into AV? Is it any different?
Well, like I said, the students in the roommate groups in the lottery number order are able to select from what's available. And so while we will predetermine how many juniors would be able to pick CTS or UT based on the space that we have, it's really their choice when it's their turn to pick. And so, for example, if they come up to the table and there's UT space available for their group of 4, they can pick that space. If there's a space in CTS, they can pick that space.
All right.
So it really is it's definitely a first come, first served system, but it's really their choice when it's their turn to pick. We don't predetermine that you have to live, here or there.
So basically, you get a lottery number, you go in and you pick what's available for your group of 4. All right, I understand now.
Yeah.
So the university is getting bigger. There's a lot more freshmen who came in this year, and with Greek houses, they're concerned about where they're going to put all their new members. So how is the university trying to address this issue?
Yeah, there are some long-term planning processes that are going on with the president, the administration, and the board of trustees. So they are working to kind of develop a plan for the coming years. We in Residence Life are very mindful. We, on almost a daily basis, we're checking how many incoming freshmen are there, how many contracts have been completed, how many people have committed to Butler. We're checking that on a daily basis and keeping an eye on it. I know the admission department is also very mindful of that, and they try to bring in a class that will fit on campus. As we go forward, we look at the numbers for kind of each class, and we do a breakdown of how many spaces we have, how many people traditionally go into the Greek houses, because those numbers don't change. And so really it's just kind of a math problem to figure out how many people can stay in each of our different buildings and how we're going to allocate that space for juniors and for sophomores and for freshmen.
All right. So you mentioned that we will continue to use CTS next year. And there will be some junior space in there. Will that be mostly sophomores then?
Well, again, we won't know until the spring break time, once all of the online contracts and intentions are done, that's really going to be the first time that I'll have the big picture numbers of how many seniors we have, how many juniors we have, how many sophomores that want to live on campus. And from those numbers, that's how we determine how many spaces are available, particularly in CTS and UT, because you know, again, we have to be mindful of the fact that sophomores cannot live in the apartment village. So we do have to allocate our spaces accordingly based on the numbers of contracts that we receive.
Right. So you mentioned getting your number of students who want to live on campus. Do you have a pretty good amount of commuters usually every year?
You know, there are maybe 100 or so. Their parents live, you know, within a 30-mile or so distance to campus, and so we do allow them to commute so that they don't disrupt that family home environment that they're used to. But you know what? There's a lot more students who live in the area that live on campus because they want that traditional on-campus experience.
Okay. I was just curious about that. So getting back to on-campus living, I know that there are plans for a parking garage that would also house some students. Do you know anything about that?
That's one of the things the Board of Trustees is considering. I don't know exactly where they're at on that project. But yeah, it's going to be kind of a mixed-use facility. It'll be, the way that it's looking right now is that, you know, it's planning to be a parking garage, but it's also kind of almost at the same time, perhaps, they're building a residence hall there too. So it's very exciting, but until the board actually approves it, I don't know what it will actually look like or what it will actually be.
All right. And you think that it will, do you know if it'll better address our needs? Do you think?
Oh, sure. I mean,
Our current
any
needs?
additional space is going to be good, you know, because, you know, we again base the number of people who are admitted to Butler in some part on how much space we have in the residence halls, and so we bring in more space, and that makes it either everybody more comfortable, and then our classes, you know, could potentially rise if we have more space to put people.
Well, that's all I have for you today. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining me today, Doug. I'm Mary Alger, and that wraps our first segment of the Butler Beat. JoJo Gentry will be interviewing Dean of Student Life, Irene Stevens, in our next segment.
Welcome back to the Butler Beat. I'm JoJo Gentry. Joining me in the studio today is Butler University's Dean of Student Life, Irene Stevens. Irene, thank you very much for joining us today.
You're welcome, JoJo.
And today we're here to talk about the housing process that begins for students next month. So my first question for you is, the housing process for students begins next month, and all freshmen, sophomores, and juniors are all required to live in on-campus housing. Tell me what current and incoming students should be doing or planning to do.
Okay. Well, currently we have incoming students already filling out the housing contract online. That started a couple of weeks ago, so as they get accepted to the university, they will begin to fill out the contract online. We don't actually make those assignments, though, until June, once the class is pretty well firm. The returning students will be getting some information from Residence Life next week about going online and filling out their housing contracts for those who are going to be living in our residence halls or apartments. And if they are living in a Greek house, we ask for them to go online and just indicate they're living in a Greek house, and we'll get confirmation from that from each of the chapters. And if they're living at home, we also ask them to do that so that we just have a, you know, because sometimes they want to change. They live at home one year, and then the next year they may want to come on campus. So we just ask for them to fill us in every year of what their plans are.
Students tend to worry about getting their first preferences on campus housing. Who gets first priority during the housing process?
Well, we have a seniority process. So we take it from the people who have lived in housing the longest get the first priority. So if there are any current juniors who want to return to the village next year, then they have the right to remain in their apartment or select a new apartment. But then what we do is we put all of the rising juniors in one pool and all of the rising sophomores in another pool. And within that pool, we randomly select lottery numbers and assign them each a number. So, and then the Residence Life staff will list those numbers and indicate to students what time they should show up in the Riley room to pick a particular apartment or room.
The acceptance rate for those who apply to Butler is about 60%. with approximately 10,000 people applying for Butler in the last few consecutive years, what would happen if the number of students who decided to come to Butler would be more than the number of on-campus living for them?
We have had that situation a couple of times in my tenure at Butler, and one time we went to an off-campus site and we had a hotel where a number of students lived, and they commuted into Butler. And that was popular for that group of students. They enjoyed that experience. Other times we have gone and made reduced rate or temporary triples in Ross and Switzer Hall to accommodate the new students. Currently we have that situation where we have some rooms at CTS. We have some apartments at CTS that we have contracted for this year and for next year to accommodate a few of those students that we think we're going to need extra space for.
There were ideas of sophomores having to live in Schweitzer last year, an all-girls freshman dorm that can hold up to 470 people. If the number of students continues to grow, would freshman dorms like Schweitzer Hall become an on-campus living option for sophomores in the future?
Okay. Well, our goal is to manage the incoming number of students so that we don't have to use Switzer for more upper-class housing, that they will have the option between Resco, University Terrace, and the Village to accommodate all of our students. That's the goal. We are also looking long range to develop another housing unit or facility, and that will be going to the trustees shortly, sometime this year, about approving an apartment facility. And it's not an apartment facility, it's a pod housing facility, and a parking lot and some retail space behind Clues and the Schrott Center. So we anticipate that that will probably get approved, and we will be working on that facility to open up within a couple of years.
Because of the increasing number of freshmen coming to Butler, the acceptance quota for Greek members was higher than last year's.
Yes.
Greek houses such as Delta Gamma accepted more women than their quota. There is not enough space for all sophomores and juniors to live in the Greek houses next year. Tell me about the options for juniors who can no longer live in their houses because of the capacity issue, and how high of a priority would they be in the housing process?
The juniors who are Greek and want to move on campus because they don't have enough space in their chapter house will be treated like any other junior. So they will fill out on-campus housing contracts, and they will be put in the lottery system, and they will just see where their lottery number comes out, just like any other rising junior. And they will be having the option of choosing University Terrace, CTS apartments, or the apartment village. The majority of juniors will be in the apartment village because the village is not allowed to house rising sophomores. They're only allowed to house juniors and seniors. So we will fill the apartment village, but there will be some juniors who will be living in CTS and University Terrace.
Also, students tend to stress about whom they live with.
Yes.
What would you recommend to current and incoming students who are looking for new roommates?
Well, for current students, I think it's important for them to select their roommates now, start thinking about it now as they fill out the housing contract. And they should come with a group of 4 to room selection the week of March 25th, I believe. So come with a group of 4 and have your priorities kind of assigned ahead of time within the group. And so the person who's selecting the actual apartment can just go through and kind of go through the priority list and select what they want. New students oftentimes will meet someone online via the Butler New Student Facebook page, or they'll meet someone at New Student Registration Days in April, May, and June. And what we find they do is they will then email the Residence Life office and say, I've decided I want to room with so-and-so. And Residence Life will accommodate their wish. If they meet someone at Butler in the new student class and they want to live with them, then Residence Life can accommodate that as long as they know by the first part of June.
Okay. What changes should be made to improve the housing process from previous years?
Well, I think we made some changes this year. We took away the process in the past where it was based on credit hours. You got your lottery number based on credit hours. And we just did a random sampling this year because we thought it was unfair that some of the students who took a lot of AP hours in high school got preference even though they may not be taking as many credits at Butler, you know, but simply based on high school performance. So we made it solely based on if you're in the sophomore group or if you're in the junior group, you're randomly selected. So we think that's going to be better. We also are in the housing selection days when they come into the Riley room to pick their apartment. We've made time slots smaller so they don't have to stand in line so much. They can just show up at their time slot and pick their apartment then. They don't have to come early and wait around. And we're hoping to make it a little bit more festive this year also, to give them something to do besides just stand in line for their apartment. So I think it's going to be a better process this year.
Good. And last question I have for you today. What are your expectations for students going through the housing process next month for the 2013-2014 academic year?
Well, my expectation is that they'll pay attention to the emails from Residence Life and get their housing contracts in right away, and then start working on who they want to live with and pick some people that they feel like they're compatible with, and so that they have a good experience next year in their apartment or in their ResCo.
Mrs. Stevens, thank you very much for your time today.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining me today, Dr. Stevens, and thank you for joining us on this edition of the Butler Beat.